Army basic training in August of 1985, going on 38 years ago. Now imagine being 59 years old and reporting to basic training.
You understand? Yes, drill sergeant.
Nobody ever goes through basic training and thinks to themselves, oh, I want to repeat that. I figured my Marine Corps boot camp that I went through in 1978 was sufficient.
Now here's a guy who was a Marine, active duty for 3 years, went to boot camp back in the 1970s, and has made the decision at the age of 59, after a mixed service record of active Marine Corps as well as active duty Army, as well as reserve or National Guard service, to go back in, but he's going to be required to complete Army basic training. Same.
I was unaware that I was going to have to go back.
I want to stop it right here. I got to believe that the drill sergeants in the cadre in the BCT environment had to suspect when they first saw this guy, this is probably an undercover sergeant major or somebody sent from the United States Congress to conduct an investigation into the basic combat training environment. This guy looks like he should be a command sergeant major. He doesn't look like your average trainee, that's for sure.
Basic training. Picture yourself, a 59-year-old man, being thrust into a situation by which you have to be with 17 to 19-year-olds.
I went through Army basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky at the age of 17. It was 3 months long, one station unit training, and it was the toughest thing I'd ever done. I couldn't imagine doing it at age 59.
For 3 months. Words are pretty cheap. You don't sit around and talk about what you can do. You show people what you can do.
The oldest trainee is a pretty inspiring story. Pretty incredible decision for somebody to make at that age.
In 1978, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps for 3 years. Got out and got into law enforcement. And then Desert Storm broke out and I went back into the military, hoping to get into combat operations. I've been deployed to Afghanistan, Kuwait, Asia. I was in the infantry and I joined the National Guard up to about 2009. And then I exited service. Today, I wanted to go back for 4 different reasons. One was because my son is in the Army Reserve near my home. The ability to serve with my son, which very few people get an opportunity to do. That was a biggie. Then the next one was I have about 2 more years to do to get my retirement from the United States Army. Number 3, I felt like I wanted to serve my nation. I had much more to give. And number 4, and most importantly, I felt like I was physically fit enough, good enough health to do anything that anybody else could do out there and serve my nation in a productive way.
You know, I really appreciate the fact that the guy had clarity about specifically why he wanted to take on this challenge and why he was ready to do it. And, you know, the bottom line is if you have the physicality, if you have the physical and mental toughness to do it, there's really no reason why he shouldn't be able to do it pursuant to meeting all of the regulations and requirements.
So that was the decision-making process for me. So here I am. And I spoke to my wife about it.
I busted out laughing. Yeah. It was funny.
Both of the kids laughed.
She thought it was funny. Everybody who heard it probably thought it was funny. But this is a guy who is clearly pretty intentional and purpose-driven, somebody who's motivated, physically and mentally tough, and I think pretty much up to the task.
But not in a mean type of way. But you know what? I think you don't have to give up when you get older. You keep going.
So I figured, why not? I think I'm extremely driven. I'm not going to take no for an answer, and I'm not going to quit. I'm going to exhaust every possible avenue to achieve the desired end goal.
I want to stop there and focus in on that for a minute. you know, in today's society, we have so many members of our society who are willing to quit before they even get started. We have to be more resilient than that. This is a guy who is exemplifying um, resiliency. He's exemplifying focus and determination. And that's the kind of people we need to be. We need to be people with grit. And here's a 59-year-old guy with grit by the truckload.
There were some areas of conflict getting back in. I had to submit packages and hundreds of pieces of paper. After 14 months of going through this process, they said, okay, you can come to the recruitment station. We'll put you back through the physical one final time. That was physical number 4, by the way. During the process of signing the contract and going through the paperwork, they told me, oh, and by the way, there's been a regulation change. You have to go back to basic training.
The phrase, oh, by the way, is recurring and very common within the military. As you're navigating process, as you're navigating promotions, or as you're navigating requirements, that's a phrase that you're going to hear with some frequency as you're overcoming obstacles that are in front of you in the military environment.
I stopped and looked at him and said, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. I didn't have to go back to basic training the last time. Why would I have to go back to basic training now? They said, well, the regulations changed. So I guess that's it, huh? You're not going to do the contract. And I thought to myself, I'm 59 years old. I just really do not want to do this. But this is just another obstacle that's been laid before my feet to stop me from doing this. And I'm just going to do it.
Either you're up to it or not. Whether you're 17, 25, 33, either you can go into that military environment, basic training, and perform, or you can't. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you meet the eligibility criteria, like this guy did, or any of the cohorts who were there with him, you either meet or don't meet. One of the challenges that I have as somebody who spent 28 years in the military is the changing of the standards. They have reduced the standards of performance within the BCT basic training environment or boot camp for the Navy or Marine Corps. And that's just garbage. It has resulted in huge challenges in terms of readiness for our military forces.
You get off the bus and there's drill sergeants waiting for you. And then that's where the fun and games begins at that point.
Hurry up, hurry, go.
The drill sergeants, when they saw me, were stunned. It became comical to me because I knew when a new drill sergeant would see me, they would instantly stop. There was like a moment of hesitation and they would kind of look at me and then at some point walk up to me and ask me, how old are you? I've never seen anything like this. This is bizarre.
Now, when I went through basic training and through most of my BCT environment experience, we would have guys who would change their branch, or perhaps they've had a break in service and they would come back in, but they might come back in as a E4 specialist E4. They might come back through as a sergeant E5, and we would call them bears. And they weren't exactly engaged in the same way as the rest of the trainees. And this guy is a staff sergeant. He's a very different animal. Now, I know that he had to pass all of the same requirements of any other basic trainee in that environment. He's still a staff sergeant. And so in terms of how he's engaged on a one-on-one basis, it's going to be a little different because he's a non-commissioned officer. And the fact that he's in a basic training environment doesn't change that reality. And so how individual drill sergeants are going to engage him personally is going to be somewhat different. ROE, the rules of engagement for him as an individual, are most definitely going to be a little bit different than for the rest of the trainees. However, when the time comes for the entire platoon to drop and do push-ups, or to do calisthenics, or to undergo some corrective attention from the drill sergeant cadre, he's along for that particular ride. Going
through the training with the younger people, there was a burden on me as well to perform the best I could, to be an example to everyone there. People were really curious about why I was there and would tell me openly that it was really motivational and inspiring to have me there with them. If this 59-year-old old guy can do this, I can certainly do this.
I'm sure that it's true that he was a inspiration to other soldiers. He seems like a guy who was probably a mentor to his particular platoon and squad. I'd be willing to bet he gave a lot of useful advice and inspired guys around him.
I'm not getting any breaks. I'm doing the same thing day in, day out. When they got punished, I was right there doing push-ups with them. Through the training, I won the confidence of the drill sergeants because I was able to do all the physical exercises, to do all the written tests, to do all the practical application tests without any problem whatsoever. I graduated in the top 10% of my class overall, but I was pretty glad to get out of there at that point.
I'll bet he was.
The single hardest thing to overcome in that environment is the age deviation and the way people think. The norms.
Well, there's the age deviation, there's the attitudes, the way people think, and there's the reality that at 59 or 49 or 39, you don't recover from physical exertion. You don't recover from physical exertion or physical damage to your body. When you're doing strenuous exercise or strenuous events, it's going to take you longer as an older person to bounce back, whereas those 17-year-olds take about 5 minutes to bounce back. It's a very, very different circumstance. And when I went through, we had some older guys. Those older guys, when I went through basic training, were like 25, and it was hard on them then. I can imagine what this guy went through.
The culture, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. I was facing the adaptation of that. Other than that, the United States Army did an excellent job of organizing the training, administrating the training, the equipment, everything else leading up to that was stellar. It was much better than when I went through boot camp in 1978. It was excellent. It felt fantastic to wear the uniform again and represent my nation and be part of the team. It's great to be back in the organization with my brothers and sisters in uniform, serving our nation, and just being into something bigger than yourself.
So that's a pretty inspiring story. Now, if you're a veteran like me, I'd be interested to hear your opinion about what you would feel about going back to basic training at your age, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, whatever. Is this the type of challenge that you'd be interested in taking on? I'm not sure I would. I guess if I had to, I'd do what I needed to do, but I wouldn't go volunteering for it by any stretch. And if you're not a veteran, if you haven't been through, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts in the comments below. Now, if you like this video, you know what to do.